Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of the Elevate Your Running podcast. My name is Sarah, and today I'm here with Coach Amber. Hey, Amber, how are you?
Good. How are you doing, Sarah?
I'm doing great. Thanks for asking. It's so fun to have you back. And we've said you've been on two other episodes this fall, and this is going to be hopefully like a thing that we can continue to do because it's great to have you on the podcast sharing your coaching and running knowledge. You're also a coach with Elevate, which is really exciting and a lot of fun. And it's great for me to have someone else to talk to.
Well, I always love talking about running, so anytime.
Yeah. Woohoo. Yeah, I love it. Well, let's kick off the episode with our elevated moments. Do you want to go first?
Sure. So running has been, I've been finally consistent with my running after a very long time. So I've struggled with low ferritin. I've struggled with accessory navicular bone, having tendonitis all the time, and all sorts of things. So the last year, the most I've run is 10 miles in one run because my foot I get really bad tendonitis and also because of the exhaustion from the low ferritin. But the last 3 weeks, I've been hitting 40 miles a week, and I hit 12 miles yesterday, and no problems. So very excited. Hopefully, it's just upward and onward from now on.
That's amazing. I love that. Congratulations. It's been like it's been a long journey for you, and it's something that you really love, and that's has to feel really, really good knowing you're making some progress.
Yeah, I thought maybe I tried so many things over the last while and thinking that they would work and they just didn't, and you just start feeling like, well, maybe I just won't run anymore, or maybe I'll just turn into a road cyclist or something like that. But my true passion is running, so it makes me very happy that it seems like things are going really well and I can just get into some more consistent miles.
That's great. Well, now we get to share some miles together,
I know, right?
which will
Except
be
that you're
fun.
always slow. Well, not always. I've been also adding in at least one speed workout a week, so that's awesome too.
That's great. Yeah, that's like such a big testament if you can build inconsistent miles and then also have that speed element, that intensity element during the week, like you're back.
Yeah, I'm
That's
feeling
great.
way better. Yeah.
Yeah.
What about you? What's your elevated moment?
I guess mine would be that I'm in taper for my marathon, which feels really good. And it's been such a great cycle in so many ways. And I really had to take a step back from the marathon after running CIM because I had six marathons in X number of years. I guess if you take out the pandemic, I had run over the course of 2 years, I ran five marathons. And that's kind of a lot,
Hmm.
and or maybe it was 3 years, but it's still a lot. And for someone who wants to get stronger and faster at 26.2 miles, it's a really hard way to do that is by racing the marathon over and over and over again, or the training that comes with racing a marathon. So I really took some time off to like focus on speed, focus on threshold. I did some 10-mile training this spring, which ultimately, like at the time itself, was like, it was such a terrible cycle for me. But when you adapt and grow from those cycles, you become a stronger runner because of it. You become faster. So this cycle has just been really, really great getting back into running long tempos. I could probably do without the long, long runs. I'm kind of at that point where that's just like maybe the part of the process I don't love the most. It is probably the most important piece to the marathon training cycle. But I've just had so much fun with my teammates, with my training partner, being able to run workouts and long runs with her, and we're at the same pace, and that just makes it so much fun, and having people outside of running really lift me up, support me, and it's just been a totally different training cycle. I know I've said in the past, like, I've had a lot of fun in this cycle. This is the best I've ever felt. This is by far, like, hands down the best cycle. So I'm excited to be in taper. And as we record this, my legs are pretty heavy. It's been something I've been dealing with all week. So my coach like slashed my mileage this week. So I'm hoping they like bounce back pretty quickly and I feel good throughout the rest of the taper. But I am like ready to go. I'm ready to race this thing, and it's really exciting.
Indy is coming up fast, right?
Yeah, Indy. Yeah, November 9th. It's on a Saturday, which is great. And yeah, I think it's just going to be another great 26.2 miles that have a lot of wins and also have a lot of hard moments and lessons learned along the way that I can take into future training and what's ahead for 2025, which I'm also very, very, very excited about. So,
Well, I think it's
um,
good that you have heavy legs right now because I think that means that you put in a lot of really hard effort and now you have plenty of time for them to relax and chill out and get to be peppy again and want to run really hard again. So I think it's perfect timing. And you've been running all around Colorado, Boulder area with all the hills and
I
Indy's flat as a pancake. So it's going to feel amazing.
Yeah, I hope so. I'm really excited about the course and how flat it is. And yeah, there's been a lot of hard work in this cycle. My training partner Jenna was on the episode from last week, and we kind of kicked off that episode recapping some of our training. And as good as it may look from the outside, and it has been good, um, I mean, it's been really hard too. And it's been something I haven't wanted to necessarily show a lot of because I don't want to complain or I don't want it to seem like I'm ungrateful. And it's been hard.
Yeah.
So my legs are definitely demonstrating that right now. And I'm really grateful for like the extra taper week, I guess, that we're taking. Because when we're recording this, we're a little over 2 weeks out from race day. So I feel like I have plenty of time to like snap out of it and feel peppy, have that marathon pop, which is what I want.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
It's all going to come together.
Yeah, it's going to be great. And, speaking of great, we're going to transition into the episode today. And what I love so much about this episode is Amber and I are going to talk about things that we wish we had known about recovery before or when we first started running. I think this has been kind of an episode series over the last 6 months or so. There's one about what I wish I knew when I first started running, what I wish I knew when I first started marathon training, what I wish I knew when I ran my first marathon, all the things that happened during the race itself, which is a whole trip. But this one's pretty cool because recovery is one of those things that I think really gets put on the back burner of training until it has to be brought to the forefront. Something has to happen either in your training or with your body for it to become a priority. So yeah, we're going to kick it off with what is recovery. It comes in a lot of different forms and it's going to be different for every runner. We've talked a lot about on this podcast about recovery. It can be sleep. Sleep is the number one recovery tool. We know to love it, to embrace it, but sometimes it can be very, very tough to get sleep in, especially as new parents. I coach a lot of athletes who are parents. Amber, I know you do too. And it's like, and you are a parent, like, that sleep is so precious and it's so hard to get enough of, but it really is like the number one thing that you can do to recover. And then there's like the tried and true um, nutrition, hydration, mobility work, Epsom salt baths, um, the the boots,
That is the best for me.
yeah, the massage guns, right? Like there's so many great tools out there. But it also comes in a lot of different forms. So those are all the things that we can do. But I think it's really important to take a look at like also how old are you? What's your age? Because that's going to impact your recovery. The type of training cycle you're in, right? Like if you're in a speed cycle, like 5K, 10K, you're in very intense track workouts, that's going to make a really big impact on how you need to recover. If you're running a high mileage marathon training cycle, you're in your first marathon training cycle, that's going to be just a lot of extra recovery. Weather can play a really big piece in recovery. The summer months are really hard on all of us. It just takes more out of us to be able to run in heat, in humidity, um, in the sunshine. If we're running doubles, like that's all going to impact the weather specifically on our recovery. And then, of course, that stress outside of training, stress with work, stress with family, stress with anything else going on. That's all these things are going to play an impact on how fast you can recover. And I think what's really cool about kind of attaching this to the elevated moment I just shared is like this cycle I've had so much fun in and outside of running. Like my training partner and I have like belly laughs. Like we've had to stop runs because we've been laughing so hard. And then there's been people, Jenna included, but other people outside of running where I've just been able to like have so much fun with them, fill my cup, and it really does kind of alleviate the stress of training, and you're able to kind of relax and get into this place that your body really needs to be in to bring down your nervous system so it's not so much on like that high alert that I think a lot of us may or may not realize that we're running on.
Mm-hmm. Agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's so many different ways to recover. And even we call on our coaching plans, a lot of times, following a quality session, we'll say it's a recovery run, right? So that kind of is like, what does that mean? Does recovery mean you should be laying on the couch and watching TV all day? Or should you be running slow? Or should you be cross training? Or what does that mean? And that's why it's really important to figure out what works best for you, because for us as coaches, we plug in those recovery run days, but we also plug in rest days. And so, what do you do on your rest days and what do you do after runs, to recover and to get your body to heal and to repair and to feel good, in time for the next quality session or the next race. So all of that comes into play, and it can be a lot to think about, but really knowing your body and knowing what works well for you, is key.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the recovery runs, the days after like a hard effort or a long run. And then the other days of the week get to be a little bit different. They can be more aerobic, they can be easy. So that pace is probably going to change a little bit. And that's totally normal. I think it's really important when you are in a training cycle that you see different paces every day, that there is like, you have that 20% that you are leaning into, or maybe it's 10%, 15%, 20% of like that speed effort. And then 80% gets to be more of the easy slash recovery runs. And that pace is going to look a little bit different each and every day. I notice about everyone's so different, but for me, I mean, generally it's about 15 seconds per mile difference on a recovery day versus an easy day, just to like really slow down, let my body recover through that run and be ready to go for the next day and feel good.
Yeah, and it really depends on how hard your quality session was. If it was something that just like it was a long run with, half marathon threshold pace or 10K pace even thrown in there, your legs might just be so fatigued that going on a 30-minute recovery run the next day is like basically you could probably speed walk faster. Like it could be really slow, and it doesn't matter. I think that's what's really important, that your pace on a recovery day does not matter. You're just out there and you're just getting your legs moving, getting the blood flowing, and just making sure that you're getting the miles in, but as slow as humanly possible is fine.
Absolutely. I call it the Sarah Shuffle, or my teammates call it the Sarah Shuffle, where I'm just out there like the day after. So this would be like a Thursday or Sunday. And I'm just out there like
Mhm.
shuffling and just like taking it as slow as I can because I know it's going to set me up for success the next day, and I'm going to feel better, and I'm going to stay healthy too. That's the other piece of it. If we're pushing our bodies too hard too fast the day after a hard effort, that's where those niggles can come in pretty quickly, and it's a really good way to get injured or burnt out from the sport.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely take your ego out of recovery recovery runs. The pace should not matter. Go by your
Ye-
body. Don't even worry about what your watch says. I've had people that get worried because on the apps that we use to plug in, coaching plans, it'll put in like your easy pace is this range or whatever. And sometimes people get really like honed into that. Oh, my pace was slower than that. That means something's wrong with me, or I didn't do well today. And that's not true at all. I try to always really emphasize that, like on easy days, recovery days, it doesn't matter. Go as slow as possible. The only thing I get mad about is if you go too fast.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, you can run as slow as possible within reason. I've had one athlete over the course of my coaching career where I've had to ask him to run faster because I felt like it was actually like it was diminishing returns because we were using a few runs a week that he was running extremely slow. And I would say like it was like 4 minutes, 4 to 4.5 minutes slower than his 5K pace. And
Mm-hmm.
it was just not. And once I saw, so it was someone that I got to see running. And once I saw him running
Mm-hmm.
this slow pace, I thought, oh, this is like low zone one walking for you. So it doesn't actually count as as running. And like we can't actually use this in our weekly equation. To figure out, the best training for you. So, but yes, I would say 99% of the time you cannot run too slow.
Yeah, as long
Yeah.
as you keep your stride efficient and good form, that's something else to remember because I know there have been times when I've run with people who run a lot slower than me. And I have to really focus hard on keeping good form because when you get to a certain pace where you would normally be walking, your body's just not, it's not as smooth, your motion. So you really have to,
Correct.
yeah, focus on good form.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's a great tidbit. Like absolutely focusing on your form and making sure that you're running the way that you need to run. And I think one of my biggest lessons over the last year is I've learned to say no to people who want to run with me. Typically it's people who want to run faster. And I'm like, well, this isn't going to serve me today by running faster, but let's say I had to run slower, focusing on that running form, making sure you're not getting niggles because of poor running form,
Mhm.
because you're running slow. That's absolutely something to keep in mind. Um, the first thing that I thought about when we were putting this agenda together, Amber, was, what was I thinking about recovery when I first started as a runner? I wasn't thinking about recovery at all, but
No.
recovery is actually part of the training process. So just like we have our training runs, we have our recovery runs, we have our easy runs, we have our workouts, long runs, we also have our strength training, and that could be, a 5 minute hip strengthening workout or some core work, or maybe it's a longer lower leg session. That's also part of training, and our mindset and how we're using our mindset. Maybe it's our process goals. That's all part of training, but recovery also gets to be part of training. And like right now, I'm in taper, and this is a point where we get to pull back mileage, right? So I'm not running as many miles a week. The intensity is still pretty high. Um, but I really get to focus more of my time on recovery and making sure I can get these heavy legs moving again and that they're ready to go for race day. But I think it's so easy to skip. I think it's really easy to put it, like I said earlier, on that back burner. And then you realize, oh, wow, I'm overtraining, or which is essentially running without enough recovery on the backside to keep going. So overtraining happens. Or maybe it's a mental burnout of I just can't keep going because I don't feel good in tandem with overtraining. And then, or an injury can happen, which is where I fell into very early on in my running career, getting injured left and right because I wasn't recovering. I was taking every run super hard, super fast, and I wasn't stretching. I wasn't doing dynamic stretches before the run. I wasn't doing static stretches after the run. I wasn't focused in my 20s on sleep or proper nutrition or hydration or mobility work or anything. I was just lacing up the shoes and seeing how fast I could run that day on that run.
Yeah. And I was, when I started running and was trying to do harder workouts and races, even though I started out at the 5K and moved on to the 10K. My biggest problem was trying to prove to myself that I was stronger and faster and could do whatever, right? Like I just couldn't let go of the ego. And so I would race and then I would do a workout the next day. Like I was just like all over the place with just wanting to prove myself. And I remember actually one specific workout that I did, and I was with two friends. This was a long time ago. But we were running around a neighborhood and we were doing 15 minutes on, 15 minutes off. And I don't even know who came up with this workout, but anyway, I
That's
had
a long interval.
I know, right? And but I had a pace in my head that I needed to hold for the 15-minute segments. And I kept burning out. Like I would do the first 10 and then the last five, I would slow down. And my body was just like not having it. So I think we did three. And I think it was probably at like threshold pace or something like that. But after the third, I was just pissed. Like it wasn't like I was just tired and I'm like, oh, I'll have to try this again in a few weeks and put it on my schedule. It was like, I'm pissed and I'm not going home until I hit 15 minutes at the pace that I set. And my friends were like, we're going home. And I'm like, I'm not. And I was so mad at myself that they left. And I was like, put pump up music on and was like I was bound and determined to like do my at least 115 minutes as fast as I had said I would. And that one was like, a minute slower because obviously my body was tired and like I was fatiguing the entire time. So to think that I could really just like bust out an even faster one at the end when I was super tired was ridiculous. But that was the mentality and the headspace that I was in, was just I had to prove myself. And so that's not a helpful way to stay injury free or to feel good and refreshed for your next workout or race.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I'm sure you didn't feel good the next day and like not taking the time to recover either in between like the runs. I think it's really common that either younger runners, newer runners kind of get in that mentality of more, 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 more. And, Amber, we're both masters runners now. And like, we're getting that you've had it for a while and you would always tell me like it's coming, just wait. Well, it's here and it's recovery is probably like the glue that's holding my training together right now for sure. And it should be the glue that's kind of holding everyone's training together, that you get to do these amazing things in training and you get to have these stellar workouts, and you don't always have to go into the well on these workouts either, leaving a rep or two left in the tank every single time. And you can also recover after that effort. And it's just going to look so different for everyone. So I think it's really important to check in with yourself on what are things that I can do, what are things that I need to do, what are things that I have time to do, and making that kind of part of your daily routine.
Yeah, and I think too, we can get away with things more in our 20s. As
Yes.
you get older and you develop these bad habits, it's going to at some point really be a detriment. Um, one thing too I was thinking about is just how everybody has their favorite things for recovery. And I think it's important to figure out what those things are that really help you and consistently make sure that they happen. Because I haven't been running near as many miles over the last couple of years as I always had been for so long, I've found a lot of fun cross training things that I really enjoy. And one of the things is it's like a bar Pilates class. And it's small weights, resistance bands, a ball. You don't feel super sore the next day or anything like that, but it's a lot of long, like long kicks and long stretches. And afterwards, I mean, it's hard during, but afterwards, you just feel so loose, like, palms to the ground, like so loose. And
Nice.
it just feels amazing. And so like I said, the last few weeks I've been running, and my running feels like so much better because I'm still continuing to do the bar and Pilates classes. And so you have to find what works for you, but you have to stay loose because the one thing that I think people forget is running. Most injuries are overuse injuries. And so people are like, well, why am I getting this tendonitis, or why am I getting this Achilles issue, or why am I getting, this calf strain, or why am I, and it's almost always because it's an overuse injury. You're using your same muscles, you're doing the same motion over and over and over. And so, unless you're also making time to work on mobility and strength and all of the other things, it's bound and determined to happen at some point. You might get away with it for a while, but at some point, you're going to get those overuse injuries if you're not recovering well and taking care of yourself in other ways.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really glad that you brought that up because it is such a big piece to training. Like, Jenna was on the podcast last week, and I think she mentioned like 80 to 90% of runners get injured every single year. And it's so common to have the niggles or the injuries or the setbacks, but we can do things to help prevent it. And the recovery tactics are part of that process to stay healthy and ultimately stay happy. But I have had my fair share of injuries. I've had some like pretty big things like taken me down for 6 months at a time. And it's been all overuse. Absolutely. In my 20s, like having quadricep tendonitis, which is the tendonitis in kind of like the ligaments and muscles like above your kneecap. And you feel that anytime you move your knee. So if you're walking, if you're sitting, and to rest that, to get it in a place where you can rehab it, takes a very long time. And I've had hip flexor issues, and I've had a calf strain, and there's always going to be something that can come up, but doing like these recovery tactics and incorporating them, making them part of your day is really going to help you just set yourself up for success in the next training cycle.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's really important for going into number 2, like the second thing that we thought about was the type and the amount of recovery is going to be individualized to each person and for each season. So we touched on this very briefly early on in the episode, but I think it's really important to know that like if you're in a high volume season or a high intensity season, so that could be marathon training or 5K training, or in my case, like a 10-mile training cycle this spring, that was so intense for me. We were training paces I'd never touched before, and the volume was so high, and I wasn't recovering. That the recovery process gets to be a bit more customized to that cycle, to that person. So knowing like, oh, I've been in this cycle before, these are the things that work for me, that's great. But then also checking in with yourself. Maybe it's at the end of the week. I'm a big believer in like journaling your week, whether that's journaling every day for your run or journaling at the end of the week about how your week went, how you're feeling about things, and taking notice on what's working, what's not working. I think that's really important.
Yeah. And don't compare yourself to others. I've seen so many people that are like,
Mm.
why did my coach put a week off for recovery after a marathon and my friends running the next day, their coach is having them run the next day? Like, which one of us is right? Or, I want to take an entire month off after the marathon, but my coach is saying to run in 2 days or whatever. Like, people have all of these different scenarios, and they're always looking to see what everybody else is doing and wondering what the actual right way is to do it. And that's tricky because you have to know yourself, and if you're working with a coach, they need to know you and understand what works best for you as well.
Absolutely. And I think this is the season where we're seeing, every weekend there's a huge marathon going on, and social media doesn't make it any easier, because it's very easy to fall into the trap of like following people, whether you're on Strava, Instagram, TikTok, and you're seeing people get back out there very, very, very quickly. I'm not a big believer in that. I've been an athlete who has wanted to get back into running a few days after running marathons. And I had to learn the hard way that it doesn't work. And it doesn't usually work for many people. I don't know many people that can turn around training and get back into it, without something happening. And it might not happen immediately. It might happen a few weeks or a few months down the road where there's a niggle, there's a burnout, there is a flatness to their running, and they can't kind of dig themselves out of that hole. So it's really important to recover, especially after a marathon, and making sure that you're dialed into the fueling, the hydration immediately after the race, which I know is, at least for me, like the hardest part of, maybe not the hardest part of the day, but maybe like finishing the race is probably the hardest part of the day. But like the second hardest part is eating something, because that's like the last thing that I want, but it's really what your body needs to be able to recover, and to recover fast after that hard effort.
Yeah. And the other thing to think about too is just knowing yourself and knowing mentally what you need as well. I have an athlete who just ran Chicago, and I gave her a week off, and then
Yeah.
I really like to, after a week off, to start gradually like getting some time in on feet just to get the blood flowing, get moving, get some movement going again. But nothing crazy, no like speed workouts or long
Yeah.
runs or anything like that. Anyway, she had a 30-minute run on Monday, just to like, and I said, really take note of any niggles, anything like not feeling right, and walk if anything like hurts at all, but just get some movement going, some blood flowing. And she wrote back afterwards and was like, I'm so glad I'm able to run again. Like, I was losing my mind, like not being able
Oh,
to run. So
yeah.
mentally, she just really needed that. And so I'm glad for her. And I know that about her anyways, but for her, she couldn't have probably taken 2 weeks off without going insane. But to really be able to like ease back into it slowly and just get some movement, some blood flowing, is perfect for her. So really just knowing each person and knowing what they need and making sure that you're mindful of, what they need mentally, but also physically, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. And running is such a mental piece, right? Like we run for so many different reasons. And when it is part of our schedule, it's part of our day, it can be really tough. Maybe not the day after a race, maybe not 2 days after a race, but definitely by like the third day, I'm already anticipating like when I'm going to want to start running again, even though I know I'm taking probably more time off than I've ever done before after a race. I think it's really important to honor that and maybe lean into other hobbies, seeing friends and family, things that you've had to say no or not right now to during the training process, and re engaging in those things to kind of help offset that mental side of things. But the marathon blues are real, it's a
Mhm.
thing, and it's what most people go through. And it's probably one of the reasons why people jump back into it so quickly, or they say, they feel good But like in last week's episode, Jenna walked us through what's actually going on in the body, inside the body, that we're not
Mhm.
really aware of. And that's what gets us
Yeah.
down the road, because our body, our muscles, our tendons, our organs are not ready to start running again a few days after a hard effort.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. It gets to be personalized. So knowing what works, what doesn't work, it gets to be also this fun, way to learn more about like what you need and what is going to set you up for success moving forward. The next thing that we thought about was you can't overdo the recovery. That's right. You can't have enough recovery. Like if recovery were a thing, you could just want more and more and more and more of it, right? It's not going to be something that if you overdo it, it's going to hurt you. At least that's my take on it, because you can always overtrain, you can always get hurt, you can always like get burnt out. But I really can't see the overdoing recovery and that being an issue.
Yeah, I think people oftentimes worry about fitness, losing fitness, if they're taking too much time off after a race or after a hard season. And I think that's something that's also personal. It kind of depends on the person and what their goals are and all that good stuff. I have a
Yeah.
friend who drives me crazy because she has taken off so many like big chunks of time. But if the reason why she drives me crazy is not taking off the time, let me clarify.
Yeah.
It's because she comes back and it's like she was never down. She can just like pop right back in and go run 8 miles and whatever pace, and it's like totally fine after like 6 months off. And I'm like, how do you like, it's just like baffling to me because I feel like I'm not like that. I do tend to lose fitness. And I do tend to really miss running, and I can't really take big chunks of time off mentally or physically without losing a lot of things that I need. But that's what worked for her. And every time she's bounced back like this newly like refreshed person ready to go. So it's just interesting how different we all are and how we just need different things. And definitely, if you're feeling, I think we talked about this in another episode, but if you're feeling like so tired and exhausted and dreading your runs, those are all signs of overtraining. And having a
Yeah.
period or a season off where you're not worrying about running could be something that you really need. So I don't think you should worry about losing fitness. I think it's more about making sure you're taking care of your body and knowing that even if you do lose some fitness because you take a period of time off, you'll get it right back. Like it might take a little longer than my friend, but it'll come back for sure.
Yeah, that's great advice. I think it's really important to know like you can't stay fit year round. There's going to be ebbs and flows, dips and valleys. You go through a race. Essentially, you want to be standing, towing the line on race day, feeling fit as possible. And you want to cross that line knowing you threw all your fitness into that race. And now
Mm-hmm.
you get to recover and build back up. I think we're a little bit different in that sense of like, if an athlete, I've had athletes like train really hard for, a race, and then they're still working with me, and then they'll be very inconsistent. They won't be running workouts. They're just like letting their fitness whittle away. And that can be really frustrating if they're trying to go after a certain time goal, or
Mm-hmm.
they have these goals that they want to go after and they're not consistent with stacking the training cycles or stacking the wins. I think it's really, really, really important to take that time off and to recover and to reverse taper, which is essentially, like Amber said, like the 30-minute runs, kind of that second week after marathon training or after the marathon itself. That's something I prescribe too. And it's just a few runs a week. And then you gradually just build in mileage. You start to sprinkle in strides, and then you go into speed workouts. And it might take 4 to 6 weeks to get there. And that's all very, very normal. It doesn't have to be this overnight thing. But I also think it's important that if you are striving for goals and you want to be consistent, you want to stack training cycles, that you're not taking considerable amount of time off between each training cycle. I think it's very, very important to take time off if you feel like that mental burnout, if you feel like you need to invest your time in other things. I think that's really, really important.
Yeah, I agree. And it's all about your goals too, where you're at in your life and what your goals are. I've had athletes
Yeah.
before take off a few months because, they're traveling all summer with their kids and
Yeah.
family, and it's like they just can't and don't want to put running as a priority. And I understand that, and that's totally fine. Everybody has to decide what their priorities are in their life at any given season.
Yeah.
So, but I also have noticed that people who do that seem like when they're ready for the next season, they're so ready for it. It's like, okay, now
Yeah.
this next training cycle is for me, and I'm gonna, I've got these big lofty goals, and I'm gonna go after them. So, times and seasons for everything for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And that's like more intentional, I think, too, of saying, hey, I have this summer with my kids. We're going to be traveling. I'm going to take time off. Um, I think sometimes I see it in runners who say they want to do it and then it just doesn't happen. It's
Mhm.
like, oh, why are you like taking all this time off? If your goals haven't shifted, or maybe they have, but it hasn't been communicated. But um, yeah, it's really important to just do ultimately what's going to make you happy and not really comparing yourself to what others are doing with it, whether that's in the recovery season, if that's, coming after running 26.2 miles, if that's on social media, or maybe it's, everyone else is training. I feel like I need to train if that's not really what's like in your heart. I think it's really important to lean into what is going to make you happy the most.
Yeah. So I have a question for you. After Indy, what's your ideal recovery going to look like? If you could just have anything, you have like three people massaging you. You've got
So I
somebody
think
with a
I shared.
feather feeding you grapes. What does that look like? What does your ideal recovery look like after?
Oh, that's so great. That's a great question. What does my ideal recovery look like? Well, I'll tell you what's not my ideal recovery, but what I'm doing is that I have a flight home a few hours after the
Oh
race.
gosh.
And I did that on purpose because like I don't sleep well the night of a race, right? I think that's true for most people. A race of this distance. And I just didn't want to be in Indianapolis for a third night in a hotel room feeling miserable. And I thought, I want to get home to my dog. I'd rather be miserable in my own bed. And I just really hope this is the third time I've done it, that I've flown home the day of the race. And the first time was after the Chicago Marathon where I PR'd, and it was a very miserable walk off that plane. And that is what I'm hoping for. On Saturday, the night that I'm walking off the plane without an injury, but just because I put the effort into the race. Um, so I think ideally it's like my sleeping is pretty normal very, very quickly. I know I shared last week on the podcast that after my first marathon, I thought it would be a great idea to get a massage the day after my marathon. Turns out that's not the right thing to do. I don't think for anyone, because your muscles are so tired, they're so fatigued, they're so damaged that that massage turns into 60 minutes of just pure pain. Like it is not enjoyable. And I have a pretty high pain tolerance. I love deep tissue massages. Like the deeper, the harder pressure, the better. But this case, I walked out feeling worse. It was such a miserable experience. So I won't be getting a massage until maybe later in the week, but I'm so excited to like take my Epsom salt baths, use my compression boots, and I'm hoping, crossing my fingers, that the weather's like nice enough to be able to take my dog on hikes, take Kenzie out on hikes, because that's been the one. Oh, I'm sure there's other things in training, but that's been a piece to like my fall in early summer, really starting in August, where I've had to really dial back my walks and hikes with her. And that's really such a great time for both of us to be outside. I love being outside in the fresh air. So I'm excited to get back to that, but also, of course, like taking it as easy as possible. I think sleeping in, drinking coffee, um, having time back in my day is going to be really nice. And I've, someone asked me, yesterday, I think, like, what am I going to do with all my extra time? And I have so many fun projects for Elevate that have been sitting on the side that I want to dive into. So I know I'll have some time for that too. And I get to see my sister the week after the race. There's so many great things about a recovery week that I'm leaning into. So it should be good.
Good.
Yeah. What about you? I'm going to turn this question right back on you. Like, I kind of gave you a very practical, this is what I'm doing type of week. But if you could do anything, like, what would it be and why?
I don't know. I have a hard time. I'm an all or nothing person, right? So I feel like sometimes in the past, after a really hard race, like a long one, like a marathon, I've like not moved from the couch for a while.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like it's like watching an entire, series of something on Netflix, because I feel like I deserved it because, I just had all this hard effort. But typically, what happens is then you can't get off the couch. Your legs are like, don't work. You can't even make it to the kitchen to get a snack. So that's not typically the best thing for me. Maybe like, the rest of the race day, that's fine. And then wake up the next day and at least like walk around. I think
Yeah.
it's important so that you're not suffering. Like you've got to get some blood flowing and just a little bit of movement. But I eat my favorite things. I usually always crave like a nice juicy burger,
Yeah.
rare.
Yeah, it's all about indulging this week, right? Like the week after a race, for sure.
Iron protein I usually crave. So a nice juicy burger, some fries because you have to have fries with your burger, and then yeah, I usually after the first day where I've laid around on my couch eating my juicy burger, I typically just take it day by day, like how I feel, and
Yeah.
just kind of go by what is your stomach telling you you need, what nutrients do you need, um, what are your legs telling you, what is your body telling you, and try to get some movement in and get some sleep in. I'm very, and I know that I'm very lucky for this, but I have a massage table at my house, and I have a
Nice.
live-in massage therapist, which is my husband.
That's so nice.
And this is how rude I am and how good I have it. And that is that when he needs a massage, I book him an appointment. And he goes and gets his massage. And when I need a massage, I just tell him I need one, and he just drops everything, gives me a massage on our table that we have. So anyway, I'm very lucky that way. So at some point within the week that I start feeling like things loosened up enough to where I can really get a nice massage, I could make that happen. So yeah.
Yeah. And that's like the best feeling once your body's recovered enough and just having that relaxation moment and like getting and working out any kinks or anything that's tight and just having that like that nice R&R moment. It's so great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But making sure to hydrate is always important too. I feel like you're always hungry. You're always hungry. You're always thirsty. I'm always hungry, but you're always thirsty right after a race.
Yeah.
But then it seems like as the days go on, you forget, right, how important it is to continue to hydrate. So that's one thing to keep in mind. But definitely just relish in your success. Like whatever happened, be proud of yourself. Listen to your body, listen to your mind, do what you need to do, and just be proud of the effort and the training cycle that you put in.
Absolutely. And I always feel like the second day after the race is like the worst day. That my body just feels the worst that day.
Mhm.
So if I'm racing this year on a Saturday, that's going to be Monday, and then things start to like feel a little bit better every single day. Um and you might feel that after workouts, after long runs, anything new that you've been adding into training. I've kind of had situations in this training cycle where I've had an 8 by 1K workout, 60 seconds rest that actually got moved because my coach changed it. She said recovery starts when the first person in the group crosses the line, the 1K
Oh,
line. And since I was basically at the back of this pack, I got like
30 seconds.
44 seconds.
Oh,
Not like I was counting, but like 44 seconds of recovery. And it was 8 by K, and it was all at threshold with reps 4 and 8 at like 4K effort. So
oh.
slightly faster than 5K effort. So it's like a bit of speed in there. And I have to tell you, the next day, feedback from everyone I ran with, like, we were all shuffling. Like, that was one of the hardest workouts. It didn't feel as hard in the moment, but just like obviously the recovery after the workout, it kind of hit us all the next day and just how tired we were. And then I've had like a long run, very recent. It was my last long run where we ran, it was a typical like 21-mile long run with 10 miles at marathon pace, 10 miles at pretty like moderate pace. It was about float effort, so about 60 seconds slower than marathon, and a mile warm up. And I felt great the rest of Saturday. On Sunday, I wasn't fatigued at all. And that's been like the first time I've ever felt that way after a long run. So you can kind of like pat your back, pat yourself on the back about like the recovery and the consistency, the training, all the little things that you've been doing in training leading up to that moment to kind of get to that place to feel that way.
Yeah, we call it the DOMs, the
Yeah,
late onset
that's right.
muscle
That's right.
cardiovascular.
Day two. Yikes.
But one thing you have to look forward to, Sarah, I'm telling you, is when you get older, things change even worse. So I get the DOMs for sure, but what happens is the older that I get, the faster it happens, but then it stays
Like
on
the
for a
longer
couple
it
days, you
stays.
know?
Yeah,
So like,
I
I mean,
know.
I've had workouts where I sit down for a minute to take my shoes off and I can't get up. Like it's that fast to where
Yeah.
I'm sore and tight and like everything's tightening up. And then, yeah, it takes a couple days. But I remember when I was younger that it was like, like I was fine until the next day. And then I was having the muscle soreness and all that. But now it's like immediately. Something
Yeah, it's
to
well,
look
it's
forward
I feel this. I feel this because like after track workouts, like I can very easily just get right into my car and like I
to.
might go out and grab a breakfast sandwich. I might grab a coffee. I might be going straight into strength. I might drive home. There's like a variety of things that I could be doing. And every time I get out of the car, if I don't do like some sort of stretch after the workout, I am so tight and so sore. And I'm just walking like a pigeon kind of like to my home. Like it's just from my car to my home. It's just like so funny, but I think it's really important that if you are having those hard efforts, those hard sessions, that you are stretching after before you sit down because it's definitely going to hit you. And of course, as the older you get, the faster it just starts to happen, the longer it hangs on. Everything that you hear about is true. Um, and that leads us to our last point for today, which is something that I wish I knew when I first started running about recovery is that nutrition is actually fuel and recovery. So the more that we can give our bodies before, during, and after a workout, a long run, a race, the faster we're going to recover. And of course, like Amber said, in your 20s, you can get away with a lot. in your 30s, you can get away with things until you just can't. And I am very convicted in like the 40s, the masters running. As soon as you turn 40, it's like on your 40th birthday, things just change. It's like instantly harder to do everything. And you just need to do more. So, what I've found after this training cycle in particular, I've been drinking a protein shake as soon as I get back to my car. Like within like I shut the watch off, like turn the watch off, save the run. I'm immediately drinking a protein shake. I think that has helped tremendously. Um, and just eating more food after a workout and a long run as soon as possible. Like, so that protein drink is like immediate. And then I'm usually somewhere not by my house. So I have to drive somewhere. I have to drive home to eat, or I drive to a few places in Boulder that I like. Jen and I have our spots, and we'll refuel that way. I think it's super important.
Yeah, and I think everybody has their own nutrition plans that kind of, some people just don't do well with certain types of foods. Their stomachs just don't tolerate them. But
Yeah.
I have an athlete right now who runs ultras, and she started working with a nutritionist about a year ago and dialing in what she should be eating, race week, during the race, after the race, all of that good stuff has made such a difference to all of it, like being able to go into the race feeling strong, being able to get through
Yeah.
the entire race, and we're talking like 50 miles, being
It's a
able
long
to
time.
crank through all of that and still feel strong, and then being able to recover. This last ultra that she did was so hard, and within a week she was like, I feel great. And I'm like, how do you feel great? How feeling great a week after this crazy of a race? But I think that was key. I think she was trained really well physically, but I also think that nutrition was just dialed in. So yeah, super important.
It's such a big piece to training, and I think it's really easy to write this one off and say, I just don't think so, or I forget, or it's not top of my list. But I think once you try it and then you feel how good you feel, like if I can eat a lot of food after my Wednesday workouts, I tend to have great energy throughout the rest of the day. And my Wednesdays are typically one of my busier work days between a workout that's usually 2.5 hours in length with a team, just running with a team adds time, strength. And then I usually have athlete calls. I'm driving to Denver. I'm coaching an in person group at 6 o'clock. I'm not getting home until 9 o'clock. That's a pretty big day. It's a long day. There's a lot of moving pieces to it. But if I can eat well, obviously I eat breakfast before my run, before my workout. I'm taking gels during the workout, and then I'm able to have a really hearty breakfast after the workout. I can set myself up for success for the rest of the day. And my body's in repair mode because really, that day, all I can do for recovery is eat and hydrate because I don't have time for anything else. I usually don't sleep well that night. I don't have time to be in boots. I don't have time for a bath. I don't have time for mobility. Like, I am breaking my body down very hard, very fast. And nutrition, eating, and hydration are the pieces that kind of keep this boat floating, this train moving.
Yeah. One thing I want
Yeah.
to say is I feel like we've talked about so many different modes of recovery, so many different ways to recover, and all the different things that you can do. And some people might be like, that's a lot to think about. I just want to run,
Yeah.
and I get that. But I think don't feel like it's overwhelming, all of the different things you could be or should be doing. Just take it one step at a time and figure out what works for you, and know that you'll be able to run a lot longer if you implement really good recovery And if you take care of yourself in all of the ways outside of running, you're going to be able to run longer and be healthy. And it's going to make the sport so much more enjoyable for you. But also, like, have fun with it. I mean, if you're being told to sleep more, that seems like a good thing, right? If
That
you're
seems right.
remembering to drink more water, it's going to help you in other ways too. If you're eating well, nutrition, your nutrition is on point, you're just going to feel better overall. So even though it all helps with running, it's going to help you just feel better mentally and physically throughout your life anyways. So don't get overwhelmed, have fun with it, think about the things that work best for you, and really just enjoy the process.
Yeah, that is a great message, Amber. It's a great closing message to this episode. And I think it's like, it's also true. Like, we get to do this, it gets to be fun, it doesn't have to be overwhelming. Choose something that you know you can work on and then build from there. That's what I think the easiest way to kind of make something happen. But ultimately, running gets to be joyful, it gets to be happy, you get to enjoy the process and have fun with it. If you are looking for one on one coaching, both Amber and I have some coaching spots available. We'd love to help you reach your goals in 2025. There's so many great races, so many things to do, so many things to learn in the sport. And that's what we're here for you, to help you all with running. So feel free to reach out through Instagram, and that's either at Elevate Your Running, at Sarah, SAYRAH runs happy. Or you can email either myself or Amber, and all of our info's on the Elevate Your Running website. Thanks, Amber, for your time today. It was great to have you.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. It's great talking
Yeah,
with you about running every time. I love it.
every time. I know. It's what we live for. Awesome. Well, have a great week, everyone.